It's been 9 months since the war in Gaza began, that's between Israel and Hamas. And joining us now for some more on developments there, especially the position of UNRWA that 70% of schools in Gaza have been bombed. I have Livingston Wechie, who is an international law expert. Good to have you join us at this time.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So UNRWA says 70% of its schools in Gaza have been bombed. What's your interpretation of this, and what does it mean for the human rights of these children to access education?
It's quite a disturbing development, to say the least, because going through the statistics of deaths recorded so far, between October 7th last year and now, according to Reuters, about 38,000 people have lost their lives in the face of this hostility between Israel and Hamas. Now, having that number, it's quite disturbing because in the entire statistics, half of that happen to be children who have become victims of war. Approximately 15,000 children, according to Reuters, have been killed. And this is no joke, because we are talking about human lives here. But if you look at the template set for peace and the conditionalities for a ceasefire, I think all Israel is asking for is for Hamas to be demobilized of its military capabilities and release of all hostages. And remember that these hostages are not just Israelis. There are also Americans and other countries represented, who are also victims of this hostage taken by Hamas. So it is my view that as condemnable as it is that we have lost this number of children and that schools within that region, including Rafah, have become refugee camps, according to the United Nations Workers' Relief Agency, it is my view that the same pressure placed on Israel to cease fire should also be placed on Hamas to release all the hostages. Parties must reach a truce and place the bones of contention on the table for issues to be resolved. Because Israel continues to see Hamas as a great danger to its own existence, along with Hezbollah and other countries that appear to be backing, on record, that are backing Hamas attack on Israel, such as Iran and others.
I hear you.
So these concerns must be put forward, that there should be an equal balance of pressure on both organizations. But sadly, it does appear that Hamas is already receiving a measure of an undeserved recognition as a credible organization, despite being categorized as a terrorist organization by the international community. And that's very, very worrisome.
All right, so I'm wondering what your thoughts are about the claims that Israeli strikes are actually meant to derail ceasefire talks. Do you suppose that either of these parties is actually committed to peace? I mean, Israel on one hand and Hamas on the other. Do they seem committed to peace? All right, let's try to reconnect with Mr. Wechie. Kindly unmute your device, Mr. Wechie. All right, we'll fix that and we'll get back, because this is a matter that's been on since the 7th of October when Hamas launched an attack in southern Israel. It's been on Israel trying to retaliate, and since then it's been one day after another of bombings. Mr. Wechie, I understand you're back. So I'm asking, do you perceive that either Israel or Hamas are actually interested in peace?
I think the question here is both parties are pushing for their respective interests. Israel holds the view that it has a right to existence and to occupy its own territory. Hamas holds the view that Israel must not exist because in their own terms, Israel does not deserve to occupy that territory and they are an enemy. So the question is, who is Hamas? So it doesn't appear to me that whereas Israel is insisting on its own territorial integrity, that Hamas has the right to launch that first attack. Hamas appears to be out for war. And the question you're asking for, does a terrorist ever seek peace? So if Hamas is regarded as a terrorist organization, can we indeed say that Hamas is pushing for peace? Because it's actually a challenge on our sensibilities as humanity that we are seeking for negotiations between a terrorist organization and a sovereign state. So what is the international community and the relevant stakeholders doing in terms of placing Hamas where it belongs?
Well, Mr.
Because
Weche,
we're dealing with terrorism here.
Yeah, Mr. Weche, another concern has been that, yes, Hamas might be a terrorist organization, but then the thousands, tens of thousands of people who have either been injured or killed in the course of this war are not all terrorists, or do you suppose they are? Because then the concern would be, why not focus on the leaders of this group and let the civilians live in peace?
I hold the view that these people who are being killed are needlessly killed because they are innocent human beings. And these killings must be condemned against both parties, on all terms. So what do we then deal with now is to go after the monster, which is Hamas. The global community must call out Hamas and name it in the manner that it deserves, a terrorist organization. And there should be a joint action to ensure that such organizations no longer exist. It's unfortunate that they are using civilian shields, and civilians are continuing to build the casualty records of this needless war. I call it a needless war because civilians are the biggest victims. So it is important also that Israel cautions itself and listens to the voice of international wisdom on how to go about ensuring that civilians do not continue to build the casualty ratio in this war. And I believe that that's the reason why calls have been made to Israel to cease fire. But in considering the ceasefire item on the table, I also see Israel having trust issues with Hamas because they have a history before this time. So Israel has concerns that any form of ceasefire will be misconstrued as a sign of weakness, and Hamas will harp on it and hurt Israel further.
All right, Mr.
So it is my view that, sorry.
Yes, you want to land on that very quickly because I have some other questions for you.
Very well. So I maintain that the killings are needless on both sides, but there has to be a guarantee of trust, which is almost impossible, that until Hamas is totally destroyed as a terrorist organization, it will be difficult for Israel to believe in its in the commitment of Hamas to a truce, because the truce will be construed as weakness and an attack will be launched against Israel.
But is it really possible, Mr. Weche, let me come in. Is it really possible to totally eliminate, totally take out, eradicate Hamas? Because some say that this is not just about a set of people, it's about a belief system.
The belief system that is not terrorism. That's an extremist belief that the entire world must fight against. You may not necessarily absolutely annihilate an organization like Hamas. That is not the point here. The point here being made is that Israel's interest on the table appear to be overriding its trust on Hamas' commitment to a truce, because Israel still believes that if Hamas is not taken out, there can be no peace in that region.
All right.
There can be no peace. Okay. And I also hold that view, because in dealing with a terrorist organization, you cannot let down your guard or open up to them for any form of negotiation.
I hear you, Mr.
Hamas must be called out for what it is.
Okay, I hear you.
By the international community.
All right. Very well. Yes, I hear you. Now, I'm also wondering, do you think that Israel could by chance be targeting UN as a body which has been trying to offer aid to people who are displaced in Gaza?
Well, I would believe that would be actually very unfortunate if Israel begins to resort to that, because UN is presumed to be an interventionist organization for all humanity. And on no account should they become targets, except they begin to display such interests that undermine Israel's territorial integrity. which as at now, although arguably Israel believes otherwise, UN is here to come out openly to say we are for Hamas and we are against Israel. I believe it's presumed that UN should be for humanity, and they should be supported in doing so. And Israel also should respect that lane of transaction to ensure that wherever you find the UN facilities in place protecting innocent lives, Israel should collaborate to ensure that those lives are protected. I would never support, and Israel must not consider attack against the United Nations, because that will lead to a loss of solidarity from the rest of the world.
All right, as we end this session, let me quickly ask you, since May, when the ICC's Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan said his office had actually applied for arrest warrant against Israeli and Hamas leaders, based on crimes they allegedly committed following the attacks, we don't seem to have heard anything just yet. What do you think is going on? You have about 30 seconds.
Well, I think the challenge here has to deal with the incapacity of the ICC to enforce its own judgments, even if it is still my view that that judgment was still hasty, because the issues you're dealing with, you don't add salt to an injury and expect a mild response. The ICC appear to have heightened the tension in Israel by its orders. So what you see playing out here is a quest for survival. Israel believes that it's almost on its own, so it has become a do or die affair for Israel to survive, because that is the only existing Jewish state on earth. And if they lose that status, then the Jews will be no more. They will have no place to call home. They will have no place to call their own territory. So the ICC should be very cautious in seeking to. It gave a nearly unenforceable judgment that has almost become a laughingstock because of its inability and capacity to enforce that same judgment.
All right, then I must appreciate you for joining us. Livingstone Uwechi is an international law expert. Thank you for your time on World Now.
Thank you.